Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jeffrey Lee, and today my presentation will be about drone and UAV technology and access to healthcare, with a focus specifically on the country of Madagascar. I did this paper and this presentation with a little bit of mentorship from former Yale professor, Dr. Roger Worthington, and I guess I'll get started now. So the aims and objectives of my research project was to investigate factors that affected whether it's possible to support something like a delivery program for blood, vaccines, and other small but essential materials in the healthcare sector, and to see if that's possible through a variety of different ways, such as looking at the political landscape to see if there's enough funding, to see if it's technically possible with the technology and logistics there is currently. So the first step is to identify and summarize these challenges in Madagascar's healthcare system, and then to create some recommendations to see how we can address those issues. Before I get into what the specific issues plaguing Madagascar's healthcare system is and why maybe having a drone program might be difficult, I should probably talk about why I decided to do this topic in the first place. Because I think making a paper about whether a drone program in Madagascar would be realistic or not it's kind of niche, right? Well, it's all started with, I guess, a trip to Malawi where I met with where I taught a week-long summer camp course to students in public speaking and digital literacy. And some of them were talking to me about healthcare in Africa in general, and it just sort of piqued my interest. When I went back home, I was also interested in drone technology. I've always been using drones since I was a kid. I remember when my dad first bought me a toy drone when I was 10 years old. And I guess I've just been fascinated about it ever since. So my reason for doing this is twofold. One is just because I want to explore this and help in a way that I suppose other people and researchers have not really explored before, because this is a field with limited literature available. And I just want to put something out there that could maybe help people and governments make something different. Oops. Forgot to delete those slides. Well, the methodology of my process and how I did my research was by first understanding some background knowledge, and that just entailed, looking through papers, news articles to understand the general idea of what's going on. After that, I would look at more relevant material, such as the federal laws of Madagascar, as well as looking at case studies and best practices in other countries where implementing a drone program has been successful in delivering these healthcare materials. After which, I organize everything into different aspects and categories. These categories include the legal aspects and government aspects I talked about before, as well as the technical and financial aspects as well. To give a little bit of background about Madagascar, Madagascar is a country of 27 million people, and 17 million of the 27 million people are defined as living in a rural area. And 16 million of those people live 5 kilometers or more from a health center. While 5 kilometers may not be a lot, many of these people live a lot further than that. And access to these health centers aren't necessarily easy for them as well, as one of the only ways to get around the country if you live in a rural area is if you get a taxi bay, or basically a long distance taxi bus to get you to a city center, or if you just walk. And unfortunately, due to everyone has busy lives, not everyone can take a day out of their time to just walk to a hospital, get checked up, and go back to doing their daily stuff. And Madagascar too is also quite a mountainous and hilly country, so the road infrastructure can be limited in some places. Madagascar has also historically struggled a little bit with fighting infectious diseases, in particular tuberculosis and malaria. In past years, incidences have remained relatively constant and have sometimes even gone up a little bit because of large part due to political instability as well as financial issues. And it's part of, I guess, it's part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to combat some of these issues, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Regarding the drone laws and regulations currently in Madagascar, it's quite strict. And the reason why I think that the drone regulations need to be changed if it's to make something like a drone program to deliver healthcare materials possible, is because it's just impossible to operate otherwise. If you look at the slide here, in French it says a few things, but basically there's a lot of restrictions saying how you can't be, you have to be at least 30 meters away from vehicles and boats. But unfortunately, if you're trying to deliver directly to a hospital, you are going to have to land in the vicinity of the hospital. And you can only carry up to 4 kilograms at most times, unless if you get another special permit to do so, in which case you'd have to fill out extra paperwork, and then after that, send it in, wait a couple days before it gets approved. The lack of drone-specific flight regulations have led to delayed flight permit approval and required frequent renewals thereof. This was a quote I found from one of the articles I was researching. Right now, if you're trying to operate commercially as a drone operator for any reason, whether it's for healthcare or just delivery or for recreational use, if you want to do something more than just what is within the bounds of the law, you have to get a special permit. And unfortunately, the current base drone law is very strict. And of course, this all does something really bad, which is it reduces access, speed, and communication. These are all critical factors as to why drone technology will be used for delivery instead of other means of transport, such as using a truck or a bike or using railway, for example. Because having drones there means it's more flexible. You can get it directly to the place you want very quickly. And by having these regulations here, it takes that all away. Funding for the healthcare sector in Madagascar comes about half from the public sector, so from the government, but much of Madagascar's funding also comes from foreign aid, such as US aid or UNICEF and the World Health Organization. External counts for 25% of the health, so that's everything I listed before. While this works in normal times, it can be difficult when there is political instability. In 2009, there was a coup in Madagascar, and because of the political instability and the lack of international recognition for the new government, many foreign sponsors for medical aid cut their funding significantly. In addition, the coup had also reduced Madagascar's economic output, and they had to cut on areas like healthcare as well, causing a humanitarian crisis to ensue. At the time, because of the crisis, you might see only like 12 doctors you can see 12 doctors in like a capital city like Antananarivo, which is the capital of Madagascar. But in a rural area, you might not even find any registered health professional. And as this quote says, you might just find a midwife at most. Now, Madagascar does, because of their crisis, they do see healthcare as a huge priority now. And any subsequent government after the coup that wants to get public support has always tried to put healthcare as a primary issue in their campaigns. When we look at the technical feasibility of drones, commercially speaking, drones that are available that are easy to purchase right now without custom ordering anything are quite limiting. You see probably the best one on the market would be the DJI Maverick, which only has like a 10-kilometer transmission range, which means it can go further than that, but without another controller, it will be difficult to make it go further. However, there are specialized delivery drones for example, there's Zipline, which is a company I'll get to later, and iMove Australia, both of which are looking at very long distance transport for both healthcare materials and other materials as well. As for whether the weather would be an issue, Madagascar does receive quite a bit of rain each year, and they have about 1.5 cyclones every year. So in the coastal areas of Madagascar, it's possible that weather can be an issue in the rainy season, as the winds and rain will buffet the drones if they operate during that time. Looking at a case study, Zipline is a company that's probably the most successful drone operation company in the healthcare sector. Most notably, they've operated in Rwanda, Ghana, and the rural parts of the United States. Overall, in early 2021, they have already made 4 million deliveries, million of miles of deliveries, making over 400,000 deliveries in these countries. And in 2019, 65% of all blood in Rwanda was delivered by Zipline. Now, this is quite a feat because the country is called a land of 1,000 hills, and their initial structure and logistic capabilities were limited since the infrastructure wasn't there. But with strong government support from the Rwandan government, such as setting up the African Drone Forum, they basically made an environment conducive to allow drone companies to operate and experiment within their country to see how that would benefit their economy, as well as boost them past traditional means of setting up, healthcare logistics by investing in the whole deal, like building new roads and infrastructure and new hospitals. Instead, they could bypass that with a more efficient solution. One more essential factor that contributed to Zipline's success in Rwanda was their membership with IYRC, which is the global aeronautical authority on drone operation. Not every country has to be part of it, but because they have access to so much more professional drone regulation expertise and experts who can tell them what sort of laws might be best to help suit their needs. Looking at the next steps, legislation changes are the first thing that you'd have to do in order to make something like a drone delivery health program in Madagascar feasible. For countries that aren't in IYRC, they should join IYRC and adopt SORA, which is a risk assessment methodology, which helps people identify, whether drones are safe or not to operate in specific fields. So this means you wouldn't have to set up a whole load of paperwork. Madagascar is not a member of IYRC, and I would recommend them to join so if they would want to do this. Inter-ministry cooperation. If you want to make something like this work, chances are you have to communicate and operate across different ministries, and that means setting up interministerial boards between the departments of the Civil Aviation Administration, as well as like the Ministry of Logistics and Transportation. Having pilot studies on a small scale would also help in the practical implementation of something like this, as well as a more in-depth financial feasibility study. Yeah, do we have any questions?
Great presentation, Jeffrey. Thank you for sharing with us about, well, your experience in Madagascar and things like that. Very interesting. How can we balance the positives of delivering healthcare / goods and the negatives, fears, privacy, etc.?
That's a very good question. So my paper focused more on the feasibility aspect, but I didn't look at that too directly. But from what I would think, I think one way that we would have to address this would be first looking at, acceptance to drone technology in Madagascar, right? Looking at different cultural aspects and seeing if what sort of aspects, Madagascar culture values the most. I would assume that the fear would be first and foremost with the legal side, that delivering this just wouldn't be that effective. And there'd be initial, I think, doubt over whether this would work at all, given that it's not very traditional method. But I think by promoting or showing more examples of success, such as having Zipline come and give a presentation to the Madagascar government, will be a good way to show that it's more feasible. As for aspects like privacy, it's possible that delivering these medicines and vaccines and things could potentially, I think, harm a patient's privacy if the drone operator were to know. But I think that can be easily solved by making deliveries more confidential and just leaving the delivery provider as a delivery provider, sending one package to another place instead of having to know all the information about what's inside, right?
Wonderful. Well done, Jeffrey.